Hello everybody, welcome to Rethinking Reality Episode 4. This is the podcast where I talk about the universe and things that might make you scratch your head. Today we are looking at a book called How to Become a Straight A Student by Cal Newport. And I've written down a list of pointers here that I'm going to go through. So, I read this book roughly 2 or 3 months ago because I decided that I was going to go to college. That's the main reason I read it. And though I don't remember everything I read, I do know that a lot of the techniques that I found in this book made a lot of sense, and I feel like there's a lot of good information in here, so we're going to go through that information right now. So, one of the first things that Cal suggests doing is managing your time. And specifically, he suggests starting each day by writing down a list of things to remember, and also a list of deadlines or things that you need to do, tasks. And I'm trying to remember this correctly, but essentially what the book recommends is scheduling all of the necessary items on your list in order from, I believe it's from most important to least important. Either way, you schedule a time to complete each task throughout your day, and that's pretty much it. And then you make sure to complete those tasks at the time that you scheduled. Now, he also recommends writing a list of things to remember, and he talks about something that is probably useful for students to do, which is while they're in class, whenever a new deadline comes up, the teacher talks about a test coming up or homework that is going to be due soon, the book recommends the student take out a sheet of paper and write down the assignment under a list called Things to Remember. And then, essentially, as the tasks from the Things to Remember group get closer or become more urgent, you would then move those tasks to the deadline list, or your task list, I suppose. I forget exactly what the book calls it, but you would take them from your things to remember list and put them in the more urgent category. Now, this is a pretty simple thing to do because Cal recommends this system. Trying to think. Having a brain freeze. Not a brain freeze, but it's a simple task, really, just to take 5 minutes at the beginning of every day, so pretty much just after you wake up, and to essentially plan your entire day out, or at least plan the things that you know you need to do into your day, and then make sure that you stick to those plans, right? And the reasoning behind this is because it's been shown that people who are industrious, people who are conscientious, people who do well in school use schedules. They use planners. They stick to them. So they organize their day and their week so that they know what tasks need to be completed on what days, so that then they're not scrambling around, on a Friday evening trying to get a bunch of stuff done because they have a test in math class on, well, not Saturday, but the next day. And so, I mean, it's a very logical concept that makes a lot of sense, which is just plan so that you know what needs to be done, and so that you avoid the situation of, a potential nervous breakdown or just stress that it accumulates due to procrastination. But yeah, so it's a pretty simple yet effective concept. So let's look at another point that he makes in the book, which is about studying. Okay, so let's say you've planned your day out, you've come up with a list of things to do, and let's say you come up with a list of things to remember, and one of them is that you have a test in 3 days. Let's say it's Monday and you have a test on Thursday. Well, how should you study for said test? Well, Cal recommends, and first let me say a few things before I explain this. The way that Cal retrieved or learned about the information and the techniques that are presented in this book was by interviewing many top scoring students, the students with the best grades from top universities like Harvard and, let's see, it probably says on the back here. Let's see. Maybe not, but places like Harvard and MIT. So Cal essentially interviewed these students who had the best grades at these top colleges and asked them how they do it. And they told him, right? And one of the things that he talks about in the book is that some of the answers the students gave him surprised him. Such as, one of the questions was, how do you beat procrastination, or something like that? And most of the responses he got were things like, I don't think you can, you don't. And stuff like this may seem surprising, but one thing that the book says is that, this is a big point that the book makes, is that students who are straight A students are mostly successful because of their methods of studying, because of how they study, not because of the sheer number of hours they spend studying, but because of their method and their strategies. And so back to the question of how should you study? Well, the answers that Cal obtained from these highly successful students were that you really should not study for no more than an hour at a time, because if you do, then you're going to tire out or burn out, essentially. And let's be specific here, because what type of studying are we talking about? Well, what we're talking about here is intense studying, where you're 100% focused on the material that you are studying, right? And there's an equation that is in this book, which I think is really cool, which is that work completed equals time spent times intensity, right? So if you study 6 hours, but if that's even possible, say you study 4 hours, but half the time you're not even studying, you're on your phone or you're daydreaming or whatever, well, you're not going to get that much work done. Whereas if you spend 2 hours, half the amount of time, intensely focused on the material, you're going to end up learning a lot more, because the amount of energy that you've exerted and put into whatever it is you're studying is so much more than if you had studied if you had just kind of half studied for 4 hours. So and this is what the top scoring students suggest, is that you study intently and intensely when you study, and that you take at least a 10 or 15 minute break every hour of studying, okay? So that answers that question. Now, on to the next point, which is spread out study sessions. I'm trying to recall what the book says about this. I do remember, I forget which chapter it is, but it talks about, I mean, I guess I kind of covered it in the last point, but like I said, it's important to spread out your study sessions. That way you're not spending one day, cramming for an exam, and then you're extremely tired the next day because you didn't sleep well. And that's another thing, is if you want to do well in an exam, and my professors have told me this, and this is true, make sure you get a good night's sleep. You might think that it's more productive to stay up till 3 a.m. studying your notes or reading or whatever, but ultimately sleep is where a lot of the processes of memory happen, or the processes that are the neurological connections are made in order to then recall the material that you've studied. So it's important to sleep, get a good night's sleep before the day of a test or even a quiz maybe. But yeah, so an important thing to remember is to just spread out your study sessions. It's better to study even just 1 hour for each class every day of the week than to study 5 hours one day, right? So that's that. Now let's talk about making sure that you fully comprehend what you're studying. What should you do to ensure that you've sufficiently grasped the concepts that you're supposed to be understanding? Well, the book talks about a few different things that the top students do. One of them being lecturing out loud, which can be strange, and the book recommends don't do this whenever there's other people in the same room as you. You probably want to do this when you're walking out in nature, or when you're outside, or when you're by yourself. But it is true that a great way to learn something, or to make sure that you've learned something fully, is to teach it to someone else. And as it just so happens, it seems to be, as far as I understand, it's about equally as effective if the person you're talking to is just in your head, if it's someone in your imagination. And so it often works to pretend like you're giving a lecture out loud to a group of people, or even just to one person, and just explain the concepts, the different topics of whichever subject you've been studying, and just act like you're teaching it to somebody. So I think that's about all there is to say about that. And also, I will say, this is something that I do sometimes. Now, not particularly when it comes to my classes in college, although I suppose maybe sometimes, but more so when it comes to, my battery's about to die on that camera, I'll try to finish this up, more so when it comes to just random thoughts that I have, and I feel like I need to share them. Sometimes I know I don't usually talk out loud, but I'll quietly pretend like I'm explaining it to a group of people. And it does seem to help me think. It really does. Like it seems to help me better understand what's going on in my mind and the ideas that I'm thinking through. So let's talk about the last thing now, speaking of ideas, which is to discuss ideas with friends and or professors. Okay, so if you have an idea for, let's say, the topic of an essay, it can be smart and often is the best thing to do to get opinions of other people, right? I mean, it is true that at least in most cases, 2 heads are better than 1, or 5 heads are better than 1, right? So, all right, that battery just died, so I'm gonna look at this camera. So, the book recommends, and now the camera's back on. What? Okay, forget that. The book recommends doing this, and if I recall correctly, it especially recommends discussing ideas with your professor. And this makes sense because, well, let's say you're in English class, you have an essay, and let's say you're instructed to choose a topic for an essay about, I don't know, addiction and whether or not genetics have anything to do with someone's likelihood of becoming addicted to a particular substance. It can often be beneficial to discuss with your professor an idea that you have, just because they're the ones who gave you the assignment, and they're the ones who are grading your assignment, right? So they're going to be able to give you valuable information and advice. And oh gosh, I just realized my freaking mic is not on. I never hit record. Dang it. You know what, forget it. This audio is good enough. So, I can't believe that. Alright, it's okay. I'm still going to upload it. So, back to what I was saying. Your professors are going to, in all likelihood, be able to give you useful information and feedback on your essay idea. But also your friends can be useful, because the thing about it is every person has a different perspective, right? So that's what makes us different. Well, one of the things that makes us different. The way that my brain has developed over the years to become what it is now is much different than your brain. And so therefore, by showing your ideas to other people, you're going to be able to, those people are going to be able to tell you things that they see that you probably didn't see yourself. And that's going to help you develop a broader, develop a more fine-tuned judgment as to whether or not that idea is good or not, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if it does, but right, so by sharing your ideas with people, even though it can often be difficult because, well, there's always the risk that someone's going to tell you your idea is not good, it will, in all likelihood, help you produce a better final essay. And so, well, that's your goal, right? I mean, in order to get good grades, which is what this book is teaching us how to do, you want to be submitting your best work, right? And so that's why that can be useful. And also, I think by talking to your professor, they can help clarify certain things, and you'll just be able to get a better understanding of what your professor wants, right? And so, yeah, as a consequence, you'll be more likely, you'll more than likely be able to write a superb essay. Or if it's, well, I can't think of another example, but yeah, so that's about it. I think that's the end of this episode. If you watched it all the way to the end, especially because of the bad audio, thank you. And I can't believe I forgot to do that, but let me know in the comments what you thought of this video, this episode, and let me know what you would like to see next. I plan to, that's just a little spoiler for next video, I'm going to take a look at this book called Stop Overthinking. And then after that, I'll have talked about every single book that I've read, so I'm going to have to keep reading after that, which I did read a little bit today. I'm currently reading Thinking Fast and Slow, so that'll be likely the episode I make after the one about Stop Overthinking. But anyway, that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.